Okay, welcome everyone to the December seminar, which is part of the GLO JOP annual conference. We have Eva Sierminska from LISER talking about inequality in the economics profession. Eva, it's basically 45 to 50 minutes, and I hope you're okay with interruptions in during your talk.
Yes,
Um,
that's fine.
and so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask Eva, and then we will have maybe 10 minutes or so at the end to have some discussion. But during other than that, please keep your microphones muted, except of course Eva, who needs to present. And over to you, Eva.
Thank you, Matloop. Thank you for having me in this virtual seminar, which is part of the JOPI annual conference. This is a paper that we've written together with Karan Singhal. He's a PhD student at the University of Luxembourg and LISER. And it's a literature review that we also prepared for the Handbook of Labor, Human Resources, and Population Economics. As an overview of the chapter, what we do in this paper is two things. We first look at the demographics of the economics profession, and then we kind of try to understand what are the barriers to greater to the inequality that exists in various dimensions. So for the purpose of this chapter, we synthesize recent evidence looking at the economics academia, and we focus on the challenges that are being faced by women and underrepresented minority groups. We look at the literature on the representation, barriers, and experiences throughout the academic career. So we look at graduation rates, research, publication, employment, and tenure. We have over 150 works. We've been asked to reduce this, which is the hardest job we have yet to do, to reduce the number of works, because there's more and more papers appearing. We also explore new barriers to some extent by looking at the impacts of COVID-19 and also the Me Too movement on the profession. And as in the more practical section of the chapter, we also provide a list of data sources and some insights on these data sources that we hope students, practitioners, and researchers will continue using to study these issues that we outline. What we focus on mainly in this chapter is the disadvantages faced by women and other minority groups, so based on race, ethnicity, and region. And the literature is mostly in the US and Europe. Sometimes there's other literature, but for the most part, it is US and Europe based. So the outline of the presentation is as follows. First, we look at the motivation, why we're interested in this issue, and why diversity in the field is important. And we provide some numbers of representation at universities and jobs, and also what are some differences in subfields of economics. Then we move on to the barriers that exist in the field. Based on the literature, what are the barriers in publications and research and seminars and mentorship in hiring, promotion and pay. And then we look at the Me Too movement and COVID-19. And then we move on to the more section that advocates what could be done, looking at collective associations that have already started work. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the resources for research and summary and conclusions. So in terms of motivation, what we see in economics is that there are significant gaps existing when it comes to wages, promotion, and representation among women and minorities. This is seen in STEM fields and also in economics. In terms of economics, the women's representation grew in the 1970s and 80s, but sort of stagnated since the 1990s at about 30%. And it hasn't been moving much. Economics remains one of the least representative fields for women and underrepresented minorities. And it's very similar, the representation, to math-intensive fields. And even at the moment, I think the STEM fields are doing better than economics. Particularly when it comes at more senior levels in the field. So some of the reasons that have been advocated why this is the case, it could be that influential economists have injected historical biases that could have shaped the discipline's culture, discouraging women and URM scholars. So now we need more friendly, influential economists to need to speak up and change that culture. And here I just provided, I don't really want to read that, but here are just provided some examples of what has been said in the past about women in the field. One positive light is that the gender gaps at the undergraduate level are closing in economics, but the negative part is that there's closing slower in economics than compared to other sciences, but there is some movement there. So why do we care if there's any diversity in the field? Why isn't we just let people select the subjects they want to study, and why do we need to care about this? Well, diversity in the background shapes the discipline through different questions, research areas, and methods. So this is an important part that would put to light the priorities that exist in a society. If we have a greater representation among women, men, minorities, then this will lead to newer perspectives. And then we would also have diversified collaborations. On the other hand, if we have lack of representation, then in particular policy work will be affected, not only academic scholarship. In addition, lived experiences of individuals with diverse backgrounds can be used for deeper policy expertise. So individuals from certain backgrounds could provide additional insight into a given policy topic. When women and men have been interviewed and surveyed about their views, it turns out women economists have less pro-market views and want more policy relevant actions and also interdisciplinary research. The issue that we must keep in mind also is that on the one hand, we could analyze what is the current situation, but then we should also have some type of idea of what our aspirations are. Is it 50%? Is it more? Is it less? Is it what the population is representing in terms of this representation? So in here, we've kind of, as our benchmark, for when we look at minorities, we kind of looked at the population shares, but this is, of course, could be discussed if that's appropriate. So here I'll present some numbers. Economics has the lowest representation across fields, and we see economics marked with the letter E. So on the left-hand side, we have the percentage of doctorates awarded to women. Among all social sciences, it's more than 50%. Humanities around 50%, and economics is 30% lower even than for business degrees. When we look at the right-hand side, the percentage of bachelor degrees awarded to women, this is the same. It's around 30%, and social science is around, and even STEM around 60%. When it comes to representation within the field, we see that among professors, they only have about 10%. There is a slight increase since the early 1990s, but it's still about 10–12%. This is, of course, drops when we move up the seniority ladder, because when we look at the new PhDs, we see that it's about 30%, as we saw before, and then successively there are less associate professors, less assistant professors, and the least are the full professors. Here I wanted to show you something closer to home, what the situation is at the University of Luxembourg. So here we have the Faculty of Law, Economics and Finance. I'm at LISER, which is a research institute that has collaboration with the university, but that just to show you some figures. And so at the moment at the Faculty of Law, Economics and Finance, there are 21% women full professors. This increased from 2019 from 17%. And then associate professors is 32% and assistant professor is 39%. The literature on women in undergraduate and graduate programs, again, points out that the share of women is stagnant from 30 to 35%. In Europe and the UK, it is slightly higher. Europe, we mean EU. It's slightly higher at 40%, and then in India it's 50%, but it does just drop heavily after a post-PhD. Globally, looking at the global PhD graduates, women's share is about 26% in 2021, which increased from less than 10% in the 1970s and 1990s. But again, it was stagnant. It's been stagnant at 30% for decades. Another interesting fact is that women are less likely to graduate from a PhD program, with a 15 percentage point gap favoring men. So the numbers are even lower for minorities. And here we've included the blue line is the population share. On the left-hand side, we see the Hispanic representation. On the right-hand side, the Black representation. This is for data in the United States. And we see that for all subjects, the historic Hispanic representation is at most, it's less than 10% for the most part, and then it exceeds 10% for more recent data. For economics, it's even lower than for STEM fields, and it's far lower than the population share of the Hispanic population. For the Black population, it's the same situation. The gap between STEM and economics is well, it's probably not bigger because of the scales, but there's also a gap, and STEM share of graduation is higher than for economics. Here we have the doctorate degrees awarded to minority students and bachelor degrees awarded to minority students. On the left-hand side is for the PhD, and we see economics at less than 10%. For business, it's much higher. It's over 20%. And STEM, it's also pretty low. And then for bachelor degrees, we have social sciences over 20%, reaching to 30% more recently. And for economics, it's slightly more than 10%. So the PhDs in economics in the US is not a very diverse group of individuals. So we have Hispanics less than 7%, Black scholars around 3%, and Black women is less than 1%, looking at the most recent PhDs. In the UK, 40% of undergraduate economics students are non-white, but there's a very low share of those pursuing more advanced degrees. Another thing that's been pointed out more recently is that even though it's one of the more internationally diverse fields in the US and the UK, but it's the least socioeconomically diverse field, meaning that PhD recipients usually have highly educated parents. So here's a graph showing the share of students that do not have a parent with a bachelor's degree or higher. And among the different fields, we see that economics is at the bottom. So humanities, psychology, it's much higher. There's a higher share of parents without a degree compared to economics. So there's indicating that it's also in some way elitist field to go and study. So there could be many reasons for this. It could be that people are not familiar with economics when they finished when they finish high school, because okay, we do encounter terms such as mathematics, psychology, but not everyone is exposed to economics prior to going to university. This could be one of the indications. And if you have perhaps higher educated parents, you're more, first of all, you're better off, and then you might encounter those terms more likely in the household. So let's look now at what happens after graduation. So let's look at the leaky pipeline. So at US institutions, women comprise 33% of economics academia, and less than 25% are in tenured track, and less than 15% are full professors. From research, we know that women are overrepresented in lower ranked institutions, and less than 20% of faculty is at top universities. In Europe, the situation is slightly better. So we have 32% overall females in the economics academia, 40% at entry level, and 27% at senior level. In Australia and New Zealand, 35% overall, 27% in senior positions, and 12% full professors. In India, we have 50% at bachelor's and master's, and then this drops severely for PhD and beyond.
Eva, sorry, I have to interrupt.
Yeah.
In this literature that you are citing, I mean, do they look at kind of what are the underlying reasons for it? Is it, I mean, for instance, people not going into economics, is it because there is some inherent discrimination within the profession, or is it because people's choices are made? I mean, here, for instance, we have A levels at school, but the way it is taught at school is very different than the actual economics. And I don't know how it is in the US. It is taught in high schools prior to. I mean, what is kind of the underlying reason for people not going into it compared to, like, let's say STEM, because STEM is, computers and these kind of things, sciences generally are clear kind of, if you like, benefit people can see, whereas maybe in economics it's not clear cut.
Yeah, so in the second part of the presentation, I'll have a lot of the reasons behind this that are cited in the literature. So maybe if we could wait till the second part, they're outlined to some extent, and yes, there are some of those that you've mentioned. Also, I mean, in the UK, it's really emphasized that the socioeconomic aspect has a large role, and that might be also, it's probably related also to the A levels, I assume. But I'll discuss this more in the second part after I finish with the numbers. So this was for women, the leaky pipeline, and then here it's the leaky pipeline in academia for minorities. So in the US, there's severe underrepresentation for Hispanic and Black scholars, 6 to 7% tenure track faculty only, despite there being 30% population share. What I have here in a little smaller font is that Asian minorities are relatively overrepresented with 13%, and whereas 5% is the population share. In the UK, minority scholars are less likely to be in academic positions, especially in senior roles at prestigious institutions. But this ethnic diversity is improving. Nevertheless, it's mostly driven by Asian minorities. Now, looking at the representation beyond academia, So at least in the US, about half of graduates find jobs not in academia, but other places, so like in government and policy jobs or private sectors. In government and policy jobs, we see a higher share of women, about 38%, and also and minorities as well. So 30% of PhD economists in the federal government are women, and 26% of federal PhD economists identify as minorities, but only 1.3% as Black scholars. What is happening, a new trend that is happening right now is that 1 in 7 PhDs from the top 10 programs and other programs as well is being hired by tech firms. So there's these tech companies have offer higher pay and support academic research. And so a lot of men have been going, they have a higher share of men in tech and leadership roles, and also men are more likely to move to those type of jobs. So this is one avenue of research which is promising. So looking at these employment shifts and career trajectories across groups. Finally, the last thing on numbers, it's this representation in subfields in economics. Economics is a very broad field. It concerns very abstract topics as well as very applied. So we have very theoretical mathematical concepts to more descriptive. So what our work has shown is that for women and men and minorities, what happens is that they concentrate in selected fields. So for example, here you'll see that women concentrate, so in the first column, women concentrate in labor and health. And looking at the third column, you'll see that labor, health, and development and growth is where women, there are more women. On the other hand, for men will focus in other types of fields like micro, macro, that's more evenly distributed. For them also labor. So there are these differences that could be affecting also the diversity in the field. So what's been noted in the literature is that there are differences based across fields when people graduate and also in published work and at conferences and seminars. Males are relatively more overrepresented in microeconomics and macroeconomics, whereas female in labor and development. When controlling for social, economic, and institutional factors, women are less likely to specialize even in labor and health. And when we looked at that in more detail, we found that this is due to the probability of academic employment and also expected wages. Women, what's been found in more generally across many of the topics is that at the moment, women more likely to work on inequality and gender issues. And in general, there's it's a growing interest in gender-related research over time. And why is this important? Because it turns out that which field you specialize in, it has an impact on what type of job you're also able to get and your expected salaries and wages. So then we've also looked at ethnicity part of this. So looking at where are people coming from to study economics. So this is based on the previous slide and also this one, and based on a pool of PhD graduates in the US. So they're listed at the end of the Journal of Economic Perspective one time a year. So here we see that a majority, there's not so many differences when it comes to the country of origin or ethnicity between men and women, apart from looking at South and Central Asia, where we see a little bit more from from South and Central Asia for women. And most of them are coming from the US and Canada. Okay, so here I wanted to point out what fields they specialize in. So we see this is overall. So we see that labor, and so the dark blue represents a higher concentration. So overall, we see that for the field is labor, macro, and development. They're the more popular fields. But there is some concentration by region. So we see that South and Central Asia and also Sub-Saharan Africa, the first concentrates more in labor, and the second in more development and growth. So are there differences across genders in this? We see that there's, for men, okay, there's higher concentration among female fields of specialization. So in the US, there's definitely labor, and also in Central America. But for Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, we see there's labor and also development and growth. For men, we don't see that there's as much concentration, except for South America, where we have the concentration in macro, and Sub-Saharan Africa for development. So we see there's stronger concentration among women in terms of fields. So this is a relatively new field, looking at the subfields in economics. It's difficult to conceptualize these fields of specialization, so that's why it's a more recent topic. It's difficult to determine ethnicity, because do we base it on the country of origin or background, or what other variables? So in the paper that we wrote on this, we do not discuss the optimal level of representation, but we look at the current state of representation for the moment. And it might be expected that underrepresented minorities are more likely to focus on specific topics. But at least in the paper that was overviewed here, they're not likely to focus on race-related fields, which also this is relevant for then when we look at barriers to higher representation among groups. So let's look at some numbers for published works. What we find is that people from developing countries are underrepresented. So less than 15% of articles in development journal are by researchers that are actually from developing countries. African researchers are very severely underrepresented in African-focused development journals, and also at prestigious conferences. It turns out there's a positive correlation between geographic diversity of journal editors and author diversity, but half of the editorial power is concentrated in the US, so this is where it stems from. Research by Black scholars in economics of race is often undercited, undervalued in specialized journals. So this is, even if there's a specialized journal on the topic, it's not cited as much as from other journals. Another fact is that economics produces less race-related research, only 2% of articles compared to other fields such as political science and sociology. But the positive turn of events is that there's an increasing recognition of social, cultural, and historical norms in exploring group-based differences. So here we come to the section more on barriers and biases. So how did we get here? So initially, when looking at these issues, we were focusing on supply side aspects. where we attributed differences to varying preferences across groups. So this is was not sufficient to address the lack of diversity. And there's a recent emphasis on understanding explicit and implicit institutional barriers and other demand-side factors to try to explain these differences. Economics is also described as a less welcoming field for women and minorities. For the underrepresented groups, it's emphasized that they face a double burden of race and gender-based discrimination. When surveyed, 50% of Black economists reported unfair treatment due to race, and this was only 5% for white respondents. And over 50% of Black, Asian, and Latin economists reported feeling social exclusion based on the AEA survey. Okay. So what are some of the challenges in research and publication? So looking at women authors in top economics journals, we find that there are less than 10% per paper since the 1950s. And what's argued is that it's because women are held to higher editorial standards, which result in longer publication times and consequently less citations. Men work in smaller teams and have more co-authors, but on the other hand, women are penalized for co-authoring, since they are more likely to be in lower ranked departments, they're also working with less productive co-authors and publish in lower ranked journals. So the gender gaps in productivity are larger in economics than in other disciplines to the institutional culture, meaning the tasks that are being assigned within the department. Women are more likely teaching, they're more likely on committees, leaving them less time for research. So this productivity puzzle that we have, which is not so much a puzzle, is influenced by the environment rank, career absences, and family responsibilities. But in economics, the gaps even exist among women without children. And then looking at grant receipt, male applicants are more successful in getting grants, especially in social sciences. So that's some of the reasons, just looking at publications and research. There are also some challenges when it comes to seminars and conferences. Women and underrepresented minority scholars are less likely to be invited as seminar speakers. Women account for only 23% of speakers and URMs less than 1%. Researchers from Global South, they're vastly underrepresented at prestigious conferences as presenters. Analysis has shown that seminar and classroom environments tend to be more hostile towards women, especially during job markets talks. They have more interruptions and have to deal with more aggressive questions. And when the tone has been analyzed of speakers, female economists use positive tone more often, but are less likely to receive positive treatment, even from other women. And in terms of just the seminar culture, women seem to be in the subfields that are male dominated, they seem to encounter more patronizing questions and unsolicited advice from male counterparts. Another reason or barrier or reason why we have a low representation of women and underrepresented minority scholars is because there are not enough role models for these individuals. And this lack of role models and path dependence to contribute to these low shares. So consequently, if we have more female faculty in a given field, we would have an increase in female PhD students. And that has been shown to be the case. And we could expect that this would would have a similar effect for underrepresented minority scholars. It's been found that exposure to successful women in economics increases the likelihood of pursuing economics courses. Information, mentoring, and role model exposure increase female economics majors. Female advisors reduce dropout rates and increase degree completion for female economics majors. And it's been found also that role models are crucial for women pursuing mathematics and statistics courses. Apart from these role models, there's also other things that we encounter and that could also be changed and as well, and which do have an effect on the representation in economics. So it turns out that in textbooks, men account for more than 90% of economist mentions, and women are mentioned more likely in relation to fashion and food. There's same gender mentorship increases success. So female students with female supervisors are more likely to become faculty. A higher proportion of women increases chances of them becoming elite faculty in non-STEM fields. Also, greater exposure to female peers and professors is associated with less gender bias among economic students. So the more exposure they have with different types of economists, they have less biases and are more open to and when they become economists themselves. Just another thing that we could already react to is that faculty is more likely to respond to email requests from white male students compared to other categories. And this is just not just for not just for males responding to emails, but this is also for females. Okay, so there are also biases in hiring, tenure, promotion, and pay. And of course, they create systematic barriers in academia. In terms of hiring biases, we found that in the literature that reference letters for women often emphasize effort, so that women are hardworking and men are brilliant. Male advisors are more likely to disadvantage female candidates in letters, using these as different type of adjectives. And so, I mean, consequently, women and underrepresented minorities face challenges in the hiring process due to implicit biases. When it comes to pay inequality, post-PhD women earn lower salaries than men across all races and ethnicities. Female economists in federal jobs earn 12% less than males. Black economists earn 15% less than white peers. And if we had greater pay transparency, this could help reduce salary gaps, not only in federal jobs, but also in academia. In terms of tenure, women are less likely to receive tenure, particularly those with foreign origins in the US. And as mentioned before, the female co-authorship is penalized during tenure considerations. For promotion gaps, they're significant in economics, and also parenthood affects women's chances of advancing to tenured position, even when the special tenure clock has been implemented to help women and parents with parental leave. So in terms of this section on hiring, tenure, promotion, and pay, there's a lot room for future research that could explore additional interventions to promote diversity and inclusion. And from the literature, some of the recommendations so far has been to have pay transparency, to redesign tenure and promotion policies to be more inclusive, definitely encourage mentorship programs to support underrepresented groups, and to provide training to reduce implicit bias in hiring and evaluation processes. Here, on the professional climate and harassment, just a quick overview on the Me Too movement. In 2007, it sparked discussions on sexual harassment in academia and economics. And women economists reported higher degree of harassment and inappropriate behavior in professional environments. In a UK survey, 40% of students reported unwelcome language, advances from university staff, and 10% experience inappropriate touching. And post Me Too, females started the consequences of Me Too and the discussions have also had unwanted consequences as females started fewer projects due to decreased collaboration with males, especially senior co-authors. The second wave of Me Too in economics in 2022 highlighted the ongoing issues and also the still lack of adequate institutional mechanisms to deal with the issue. Some of the impacts and responses. The issue is that even with few harassers, junior researchers will be less, they'll face more uncomfortable situations due to the field's gender imbalance. So here's another reason why we may want to have a more equal representative field. These issues are a deterrent for young female economists when they have the opportunity to attend networking events or engage with senior male economists. And so there's a call for a bit more clear policies to report sexism and harassment. There are already various organizations that provide best practices for scholars to ensure an inclusive environment and address harassment. And we, in the chapter, we include we have a section on these different associations and collectives. And there's an ongoing need for institutional change to prevent and resolve complaints effectively. When it comes to the impact of COVID, it seems that the pandemic exacerbated existing inequalities and disparities in the field. And this is mostly due to the fact that women were more overworked at home. And as a result, they published fewer articles, they received fewer grants due to these higher childcare responsibilities. In terms of the underrepresented minority scholars, there observed racial differences in economic and health outcomes during the pandemic. And then, as we know, the Black and Latin students face more education loss according to their socioeconomic status. Other observations in the literature is that female lecturers were evaluated more poorly during online classes, especially younger women without permanent contracts. And these lower evaluations were driven by male and low-performing students, particularly in social sciences. So there are still long-term consequences of the pandemic and induced disruptions, and they may continue to persist. Many women lost their career momentum, and since then they've been traveling less, been invited to fewer events. Here are some possible policies that could be implemented to address disparities in economics. So, for example, implement seminar conduct rules to improve experiences of women. For example, lack of interruptions in the initial part of the presentation. Provide mentorship and expose students to role models. Develop summer programs and pre-doctoral programs for underrepresented students. Provide additional funding to underrepresented candidates from disadvantaged backgrounds. Rethink the curriculum for a more conducive environment, and definitely address mental health issues, which are very prevalent among doctoral students particularly for women and international students. Here, just closer to home, I wanted to show some initiatives that we have at the university. So we've implemented a mentoring program for early career researchers. We also have a lecture series on women leaders from all over the world, which come or call in, but they mostly fly in and meet with different people. Starting next year at the university, there'll be this Anne Befford chairs for women professors in 2025. So these will be positions particularly only open to women professors. And then we have these excellence grants also directed towards women to encourage greater activity. Finally, to mention what else we have in this chapter. So a part of the list of collectives and networks that provide mentorship and financial support to marginalized groups, we also have a section on resources for research, where we include a list of valuable data that have been utilized in the papers. And we both mentioned traditional novel sources, and there you can find detailed key variables, temporal and geographical coverage, data types, and accessibility information. Is Karan there? I wanted him to say a few words on this. Karan, are you there? So yeah, please look at the chapter. It has a wealth of resources. And just a summary and conclusion, we've shown that we've discussed the importance of diversity. So there are multiple perspectives that influence research, teaching, and policy discussions. And all this is beneficial for the field. And through including minorities and females. Already, maybe it didn't come through with this presentation, but there has been progress made, but significant challenges still exist for the representation and advancement of underrepresented groups. Throughout the chapter, we accentuate various remedies, and at the moment, we feel like this is an adequate moment to continue studying these topics that will allow to dismantle the different barriers that individuals have across the pipeline. Again, this diverse data sources exist already and could be accessed. And of course, we need some collaborative efforts to enhance this collective knowledge because the field is very, very broad. And that's it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Eva. Questions?
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
Hi, Eva. Good to see you. I wonder, like in reviewing this literature, what criteria have you kind of have you been stuck to? Because I mean, I've been sharing some information about different studies in the same area, and I found myself to be kind of super careful, never share anything where there is any doubt that it wasn't, I don't know, a rigorous experiment. And even then, because I do this on social media, I get very I'm being kind of attacked by former male students, or being said that, basically, like, losers talk about that. Like, all of the real high quality, productive women, they are properly acknowledged. And, people who promote kind of this field, they are themselves like less productive and so on. So I'm sure you've heard about those things, but like, basically my question with all this literature that you've worked with, and your work in this area, how to how to promote that, because without talking to this, but facing like personal accusations is really difficult and challenging way to promote this area. And thank you for doing this, actually.
Well, thanks for bringing this up, because it's true. Whenever I try to address this issue on social media, I get bombarded with negative comments. And even worse, they even start looking at your past and bringing things out from your past. So my strategy for this has been to focus on a safe environment and presenting it, not going through social media. And social media is good when you finally have the publication, but initially, I've presented among colleagues and just gone through the CSWEP or the YAFI, where these are, let's say, more friendly places to share the research, or also just sharing among colleagues. I mean, these women that work on this area, and it's not only women, it's also men, they're very friendly, and they often organize something where you could participate. But going out into the social media, especially now where we don't know where to go, where X is under a question mark, and we don't know who the replacement will be, this is it's not something I want to be exposed to at the moment.
Okay, Almas, you had your hand up. I don't know if
Yeah, thank you, Eva, for your very interesting presentation. I have two small questions. One is the percentage is Black and Hispanic you showed. Is it only citizen, or it includes like green card and guest student? Because in US we have lots of guest students who study higher level of education.
Yeah, so this is as reported in the census, if they identify as Hispanic or Black.
So it doesn't matter if they are citizen or they are just
Yes,
okay.
Based on ethnicity.
Yeah. My second question is, you focus a lot about level percentages in a given year, but changes is also equally important in reducing inequality. I would be like know more about differences in changes in reducing inequality by different subgroups. Who are the best in reducing this inequality, try to use their approach or benefit for other groups to reduce inequality?
Yeah, thank you for this. So yeah, we at the moment it's just an overview, but there is some evidence on changes already in the UK for like Asian groups, or changes in some for women being represented in some type of positions, but we didn't focus especially on changes. But that's something we could do in the future, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other?
Sorry, can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Eva, well, I'm just observing kind of from my experience at our university. We have a School of Economics, but we also have research units. And within the research unit where I work, there is a large group, more than 10 health economists, and kind of a larger share of female health economists there. And I wonder, so basically, if you look at our university, then you will see that we work not in our profession, basically, because it's within School of Sociology, Social Policy, and Social Research. And throughout years, I also encountered a number of economists, female economists, who made a move to like sociology, and they work there. So basically, they are applied econometricians working in this area, more like in multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary projects. So is there a way or indication kind of to pick this up? Because like we are based there, but we are still scholars of economics, I would put it this way.
So there are various ways to pick up where you are, either by your workplace. What our research with Karan has focused on is looking at the GEL codes. So looking at the GEL codes, so this is more of typical for economics. The other thing that Karan also looked at was topic modeling, so scanning the abstracts and picking up the keywords based on the abstract. So basically, the specialization comes from your publications. So
Great. Yeah.
yeah. So if it's so, I think the topic modeling is more inclusive than actually the GEO classifications. And we get similar results, at least for these are young people post PhD in the US, and we get a lot of overlap if we do the GEL code and the topic modeling. So if it's open to other fields, sociology, socioeconomics, applied statistics, I think topic modeling would be the way to go.
Okay, anything else? Going once, going twice? Okay. Thank you very much, Eva. That was really
Thank
interesting.
you.
And
Thank you.
we have 15. Yeah. So, Klaus, do you want to say? Well, we can close the recording, and then if you want to talk about the next session.